Okay, so how does this sound? Better? Or is it worse? I can't tell. I hope it sounds good. Please let it sound good. Okay, so I think I've got my mic all figured out now. So, let's just get right on into this, guys. Hey guys! So, I know a lot of you were probably expecting a trains video this month, but honestly, I've been working mostly on train stuff for almost a year now, just for preparation and brainstorming and whatnot, and although I'm making progress on a lot of projects that should get released soon, today I thought I'd take a break before we get into all of that and just did something a little bit different. More akin to the review and discussion style videos I've always enjoyed watching, but have never really gotten to make my own. And that I kinda made before with the Journey Beyond Sodor review, but I never really finished. And God, I can't I'm really sorry about that, guys. I'm the worst. I will finish that one day, I promise. I've always enjoyed watching discussion videos, but I've never really gotten to make one of my own. Except, this time, instead of just always simply reviewing some episode or movie, I'm instead going to just be talking about any random topic in the universe of Thomas and Friends lore or history that I feel is really worth talking about and discussing more in depth, and that I just personally believe deserves more attention than it usually gets. Either that, or it's a topic that a lot of other people might have already talked about in depth, but is something that I'd still really like to voice my opinion on because I think I have something unique to add on to the conversation. And so, this is going to be the beginning of this little random Thomas discussion series that I'll be posting to whenever I feel like it, or just when I'm either working on trains videos or want to take a break and do something else for a change, or I just have nothing better to do. Every now and again, I'll be adding more entries to this series and see where it goes from there. And so the entries that I add to this little random Thomas and Friends discussion / analysis series will be a part of what I'd like to call the Sodor Study, or Studies of Sodor. This video will be serving as the first in this series. And so for the first entry in this series, I'd like to talk about a topic that's just been really in the back of my mind for a while now, and that I feel is just worth talking about. It's nothing really major, it's just a random minor little topic that I feel needs to be touched upon. And so for today's video, we're actually going to be talking about one of my personal favorite minor characters and their overall portrayal in the main series, as well as just a little bit from the fan base interpretations sprinkled in there too. In which this kind of entry video is probably going to be kind of common in this series, where I just talk about and analyze a character that I really like or just appreciate, or that I just absolutely freaking hate. But usually ones I like, so don't worry, you're not gonna hear me rambling about how all your favorite characters suck in this series, I promise. Quite the opposite, actually. And so to start us off in this little character side of my Sodor studies is one of my personal favorite characters, Rex. Now before I begin, I know what you guys are probably thinking. Rex? Rex. Really? Of all the phenomenal, layered, and well-developed characters across Thomas to talk about on the first entry of an analysis series after a 3-year-long absence, why would you pick someone as minuscule and obscure as Rex? And well, my dear viewer, to that I say, shut up and let me speak! So I'll explain myself a little bit. I chose Rex of all characters as a way to just kind of let all you guys, my viewers, know what kind of content you can expect from me overall. And this is also just to let you guys know that I really like talking about some of the more minor, obscure topics and details that no one else has really touched on, but that I feel have a lot worth talking about. And this is probably going to be something that happens a lot in this series. Now, I feel like this guy just doesn't get or receive nearly enough love or appreciation in general from both the show and the fans, because he truly deserves a lot more. Throughout my time in the Tommy the Choo Choo community, I've spent a good amount of time looking through and either reading or listening to people's opinions and videos, Twitter, or even just read through their Thomas Wikia user profile to see what their favorites and least favorites in the series are, just because I was curious. And I mean, if you're wondering, I only did it because I had nothing better to do. I'm not a stalker or a creep or anything, I swear. I just really needed to know. I just really wanted to know what their preferences and their favorites were. And looking back, I always noticed how people usually said that Mike or Bert was their favorite Arlesdale engine, and most of the time not Rex. And because of that, I've kind of come to see the overall consensus is that Rex is not really many people's favorite characters, or is their least favorite out of the 3 original Arlesdale engines. But which is not to say people don't like him, because I'm sure they do, and that many people like him. They just tend to like Bert and Mike more. But it just seems to me that I'm one of the very few people that likes him the most out of the three, which is kind of sad. Poor Rex. And I really don't understand this at all, because I mean, just look at my boy here. Just look at him. Just look at my boy here. Look at this good boy. Now, how can you just not love him? He's awesome. Now, I really like Rex for numerous reasons, which I'm going to quickly go over, but above all, the main reason I really like him is because he's just really likable, and overall, a good person, or in this case, good engine, if you will. But on top of that, he's also still really flawed, and at some points, a bit of a cocky jerk too. Usually unintentionally, but he is sometimes. And I absolutely love that, because it just makes him feel so real. Rex feels like a real person, or a real character you could meet. And I mean, don't get me wrong, all of the main cast and a lot of the other really well written characters in the show feel real too, but in terms of just portraying a simply down-to-earth, optimistic, and kind-hearted, but still imperfect, occasionally even selfish character, he's truly spot on and by far the best example of this. No other character in the entire show is quite like Rex here, in my opinion. And that's part of what makes him special. And so, in fact, I'm going to be listing the reasons why he's so special, in which all of these are also the main reasons why I like him so much. 1. He essentially takes on the role of the leader of his group, that being the Arlesdale engines. While I know this isn't ever something that's directly said in the books or show as far as I know, it's most definitely something that's just an unmentioned, minor, usually subtle, but sometimes an even pretty obvious and apparent detail that you can definitely notice consistently when paying attention to the engine's interactions with one another and their overall dynamic. And sometimes you can even notice just based on how their interactions are usually arranged and ordered, in which by this I mean who talks first and who talks last. I mean, it's even something that the wiki is included in his profile, in which, before I ever even really noticed this detail in his profile, I felt like it was something that I kinda already subconsciously knew. I'd kinda always already seen him as the leader of the Arlesdale engines in a way, but this just really solidified my beliefs even more. And honestly, the more that I think about it, the more I noticed how true and accurate this is. Fun fact, Rex was even the very first out of all the Arlesdale engines to be introduced to us in the book, and was the first one to approach Duck and actually introduce himself and talk about the railway. But of course, in the television series, Mike was the first one to be introduced to us. And I think we all know why. That little red whiny prick, I love him, don't get me wrong, Michael, over here, or Mike, as he's known, appeared first, in which I'm pretty sure we can all conclude is because he was the first one to have merchandise made of him, and for the longest time, Bert and Rex never had any merchandise made of them until Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure there is, in which they finally got a little bit of love. But of course, Mike, being the one that everybody already knows, and literally the only one out of all of them that everybody knows, because he's so grumpy and whiny and enjoyable, he just reminds me a lot of Sir Handel, but I'll talk about that in another video. And my poor boy Rex here was left behind, so of course he was the first one to be introduced in the television series, and he was even the first one to talk too. And of course that's because everybody knows that absolute Chad Mike, because that red little turd got merch long before he was ever even thought of being put in this series, or at least a while after that, because, you know, they would have done it in the model series, but they didn't. They were just too, it was just too small. They were too damn small! But anyway, we got some Rex merch eventually, and I'm working on getting that. Okay, that actually kind of makes me sound like a loser that I don't already have some merch. Wait, I promise you, I still have a point. I'm a real Rex fan, and please, wait! So, in most conversations with anyone, Rex is usually the one who does most of the talking. He's almost always the one who usually guides or leads the conversation, or if not, at least usually strongly facilitates it. If Mike's whining about something as usual, Rex makes fun of him. If Bert's upset, Rex tries to make him laugh and comfort him. When Duck, Thomas, or Oliver, or any of the bigger engines come by, Rex is almost always the first one to speak to them. It's like he's this leader of the Arlesdale Railway that just always comes to greet all the visitors and newcomers to the place when they get there. And he's almost always the first one to do it. He just seems like the friendliest out of all three. It's like an unspoken rule. For example, Mike's whistle. Who was the first one to talk to Thomas? And I mean, don't get me wrong, Bert or Mike sometimes still jump in a little bit at times first too, because that's still very common, but in my opinion, Bert's a bit more shy, and Mike's just kind of like, whatever. They'll still talk, but it's just moreover usually Rex who does the talking. It's not like he gets mad about it, but I think it would be kind of fitting if somebody did do a joke where that Rex would actually get a little bit offended that he wasn't the first one to speak. And I get how people might think that Bert is a bit of a leader as he's the older, wiser one, in which that's fairly accurate too, but in my opinion, while that is true, Rex just feels like the overall leader of the three. Then in Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure, who's the one who's usually guiding the conversation? My mind's stupid Mike and his stupid face. Rex is usually the one that guides the conversation. In most of the episodes, Rex is the one who talks the most. But of course, just as my brain clearly just exemplified, Mike always has to say something, and is sometimes the first one to talk because he's complaining. But anyway, so yeah, it just feels like he always leads them into conversation, and is even the guiding figure for them. As you can see that he's usually giving them both advice, or talking about his day, or just overall reviewing what's on their minds, and Rex is usually the one that seems to be taking charge the most. Rex is the leader that naturally guides the group with his optimism and energy, and Mike's the one that usually complains about things and makes the most drama, and Rex loves making fun of him, and Bert, on the other hand, tends to usually be the voice of reason between these two, and usually tends to heat down their arguments. But of course, Bert isn't perfect either. He's still young too. 2. Rex is the perfect image of optimism, kindness, a good sense of humor, responsibility, and overall, just a really good, fun-loving nature. Now, I feel like this is just a trait that we've never really see take center stage in any other characters, in which characters like Thomas, Skarloey, Edward, etc. are all good examples of this, as they're all pretty optimistic in their own way and tend to be the one that guides the ones around them, with positivity and advice. But in my opinion, Rex is best at it. Some might even say that modern Thomas is a grand optimist, and while I agree with that completely, as a huge fan of Thomas's character myself, in which we'll talk about that in another video in the distant future, I promise, I still think that in spite of his increased maturity and how mature and developed his character has become over the last few years, because in my opinion Thomas has developed a lot over the CGI seasons, particularly the Brenner era, but of course that was all ruined in the stupid Wubba era, but we will talk about that in another video. I still think that in spite of his increased maturity, and just how mature and developed his character has become over the years, there's still always going to be that snarky, cheeky, impatient, and overall self-righteous side of Thomas that will just usually pop up from time to time when things don't go his way. That part of Thomas is always going to be there, and it's still very clear that he's not perfect, which I appreciate. But all the same, it just shows that he's not completely genuine and wholesome and mature as we might think. I know he's like 100 and something years old, but mentally, Thomas feels like he's in his 20s right now. When I say now, I mean season 21. Anyway, now Rex, on the other hand, isn't like that. In terms of optimism, he's got Thomas beat by a long shot. Rex is always just filled with overwhelmingly positive, fun, and just overall inspiring and uplifting energy. He's always filled with motivation to do his work and help everybody out, and he never tires of it. He loves helping the other engines, but he also loves teasing them too, which I'll get onto in my next and final point. Rex always has this optimistic, beautiful outlook on life, with a big smile always beaming across his face and shining for everyone around him to see, and he never ceases. Almost never, at least. He hardly ever lets anything get to him. He always manages to find the funny side of things, and when the other engines need to see that side, he always shows it. But of course, life isn't perfect. Although Rex is hardly ever upset, or at least we hardly ever see Rex upset, it just really goes to show that he probably tries his best to keep himself together so that he can continue to serve as the glue that keeps the group together, especially when they truly need it. But of course, in Useful Railway, when Rex had his accident, it was treated as a devastating, dramatic event, as it should have, because in Rex's mind, it was a traumatic, devastating event. From what we've seen, he's never had a crash before, or at least not one we know of, in which maybe he did have an accident in the past that maybe ruined his mood, but then he picked himself up and managed to bring out this highly optimistic point of view that he has. And Rex is especially upset when the other engines tease him, because he feels like he's never fallen this low before, and as a result, he feels like the other engines might see him as weak. But, however, when the engines come to his rescue to help him back on track, they make sure to remind him that they're his friends, and that they love and care about him, and still have a lot of respect for him, even Mike, and that he's still naturally a part of their group, and that he feels like the leader. He's not better than them, but he serves as like a role model, and is almost like the mascot of the miniature railway. But, of course, nobody's perfect, which brings me to my next and final point. 3. Above all, he's a good guy that's still flawed and can be a jerk sometimes. Rex is a good end, and as a result, he's a good guy that can just sometimes get a little arrogant and cocky. And as a result of these traits being mixed together, Rex feels like a real person. This truly serves as the main factor that just truly solidifies the entire idea that Rex could very much well be a real person. Rex isn't perfect. No one is. And I absolutely hate it when characters are portrayed as just nearly perfect and without any flaws, because the writers just never focus on them. Or, at the very least, they have flaws that are never truly addressed or hardly even noticed, because the writers never let this take center stage and just didn't develop it at all. And it sucks. And that's the problem that characters such as Nia and Rebecca suffer from. They've got flaws, but they're not portrayed enough, which is, again, another topic for a different video. Either that, or the flaw they suffer from is both either generic or just the same as a bunch of other characters, and as a result makes it redundant and unoriginal as hell. But, luckily for us, this is usually not the case, or at least in Thomas, as here, it's okay to have characters with similar flaws, because as the writers clearly exhibited over the years, having characters with very similar flaws and personalities and still manage to make them interesting and distinct enough that they stand out and feel like their own unique character in their own right can work, as long as the characters are portrayed in an interesting and unique way through a completely different perspective and with their own individual personality. And luckily for us, in the case of Thomas, that tends to be the case. For example, take two CGI characters, Timothy and Paxton. Both of them can be generally described as kind and naive, but because of their overall personality and background differences, as well as how they're portrayed, they still manage to resonate with you as two entirely different characters. They both still manage to be enjoyable, likable, and interesting characters that at face value might seem similar, but are actually in fact entirely different. As a result, they still resonate with you as different, but their similarities is what makes them work well together in an episode or a story, and makes them an interesting pairing to see how their other differences play into their mindset and how they might bounce off of one another because they think differently, although they suffer from a similar flaw, and how they deal with it. On one hand, Paxton is generally naive and silly and impressionable and sometimes just simply not the brightest or most independent engine in the shed. But all the same, he's still kind and likable and gets his work done and helps others out where he can. Timothy, similarly, on the other, can also be naive, but it's completely different because he's just better. That's it. Okay? Timothy's just better. Screw Paxton. Okay, I'm just kidding, of course. I love Paxton. I love you. But seriously, it's still in a very different, unique way because while like Paxton, he's a hard worker and always tries to help out everyone around him where he can, like most engines on Sodor, but I mean, I guess that's kind of how you're supposed to be because that's how Sodor raised y'all, you know. But I'm not calling that out, but I know not everybody on Sodor is nice, and that makes sense. Okay, we'll talk about that another day. Anyway, but also, however, unlike Paxton, Timothy is a much firmer, more mature, driven, focused, and overall a much more clever and experienced engine. One that just tends to take things at face value and not really question them, as it's just his mindset. Do what you're told by your boss and not question it. But as a result, this can cause him to get confused and easily tricked, or just generally impressionable and easily manipulated. Hence why he's so easily tricked and fooled by the twins. But in the end, Timothy is able to realize this and is able to outsmart them, and as a result, he usually has the last laugh, and ends up teaching whoever the culprit of the trick was, whether it's to the twins or someone else. Thus, as I just explained, this is what makes both Timothy and Paxton good, strong, and while yes similar, but still completely unique, distinct, and interesting, enjoyably well-written characters. Now Rex here, to me, Rex has always kind of felt like he serves as a bit of an allusion to a mixture of traits portrayed by Thomas, Gordon, James, Percy, and even Edward, and Toby in some ways. But while also still simultaneously manages to feel like his own highly distinct, completely individual, and entirely unique and different character. And that's because through Rex, we get to see the sides of a character type that I feel we haven't gotten to see much of in recent times, and doesn't get nearly enough portrayal. Optimists with issues. And I say that as someone who usually tries to be an optimist myself. I definitely have a lot of issues going on too. We all do. And it's really nice to see how someone else must struggle with keeping themselves together for the sake of those around them. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything, of course, but it just makes him feel so relatable. And it's so nice to not just see him being portrayed as someone who's perfect and knows always what to do, and that it just portrays him not as some perfect, always smiling, happy-go-lucky, and usually rather ingenuine seeming, optimistic figure that never goes wrong and is never upset by anything. No. And instead portrays him as this imperfect, optimistic, kind, clever, and hardworking, but still sometimes selfish, ignorant, and most of all, just a flawed, imperfect human being. And that makes him feel just like anyone, like someone we could meet. The ever-optimist who always tries to keep the mood up, keep everybody's spirits high, and encourage all those around them, but still suffers from insecurities, negative experiences, and general problems of their own, and how it sometimes affects them rather deeply, and hit really hard, and can at times even crush them. And it's sad, but it's also relatable, and feels very real, like something that you or someone you know could experience. I love a lot of the characters in Thomas because most of them are just these iconic, lovable, larger-than-life characters with these big, loud, extremely strong, complex personalities, but they also still manage to have many emotional, tender-hearted, wholesome, and sometimes even depressing or heartbreaking moments that remind us that they're not perfect. And like us, they're only human, or trains with human faces. And as a result, they feel like real people. And in my opinion, Rex has always stood out to me as one of the prime examples of this, with him being just one of those characters who's, as opposed to only occasionally, always feels completely real, and never too far beyond expectation or reality, and feels like someone very human you could meet. We always see Rex's human side. There's nothing wrong with the Reverend or Mitten or Team Brenner's writing. They're all extremely talented and write mostly awesome stuff for all these characters, but to me, Rex has just always felt like one of their greatest achievements and strongest, most memorable portrayals in the series and overall entire world of Thomas and Friends. Because of not just how lovable he is, but also because of how real he is. He's human, and he's always human, and we never forget that. It might not seem like it at times, as with real people in life who always seem optimistic, but then we always get reminded that they too are flawed, imperfect human beings with feelings, just like us. And that's exactly why I love Rex the Small Engine, and why he is, in my opinion, the best, as well as my personal favorite, Arlesdale Railway engine. Thank you for watching. Hey guys, I really hope you guys liked this video. I haven't made a discussion in a good while, and I'm really excited to get it out. So if any of you guys have any constructive criticism to share, please leave it in the comments below. I'm really proud of how this video turned out, but I know it's not perfect, so leave some constructive criticism in the comments below. If you like this video, please hit that like button, and subscribe for more if you want to see more cool content like this. Feel free to leave your thoughts and comments below, as I am always eager to hear what you guys have to say, and if you want more updates, follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Best wishes, mates! I mean, look at how huge these guys are fucking huge! Oh wait, did I say that out loud? I'm so sorry.